to the Paranormal Experience with me, Paddy McGough. Been a while. It's been a couple of weeks. Obviously, we've had stuff going on. We've had the Euro finals, etc. But we're back, bigger and better, as they say, or they could say. So we went on a what we were hoping was going to be a live stream on Saturday evening. Sadly, the area where we were, there wasn't any what you call it. There wasn't a lot of signal, not enough anyway to get me to be able to live stream. So what we had to do was, record it, and the video will get uploaded to the Paranormal Experience Facebook page, which will get shared on the Amber Radio page. We hope to do that within the next couple of days, so keep an eye out for that. I'll not tell you what happened. I'll let you watch the video and you can see. Diane says she's back on shielding again, because that's the other thing that's coming up, isn't it? As they keep calling it, Freedom Day on the 19th of July, so people will be able to get out more, etc. So, you know, obviously if you are shielding, then please look after yourselves, and you know, if you want to wear a mask, then please wear a mask. If you don't want to wear a mask, then don't wear a mask. You don't have to, but please respect others regardless of their opinions. If they don't want to wear a mask, or if they do want to wear a mask, then please respect their own opinions, etc. We know the infections are getting higher, so you know, please look after yourselves. But anyway, what we're going to do for the first bit, for the first half an hour or so, before the Cabinet Curiosities, we're going to talk about creepy things. So these are you know, things that people have experienced, ghost stories that people have experienced. So so here we go with the first one. There is a young boy who lives in our house that our guests have seen. We rent from the original owner, and there is no bad history, but a dozen people have seen him walking around upstairs. I leave my phone on the nightstand at night and often find hundreds of scribbles open on the notepad when I wake up. So, you know, this person goes to bed with the with a phone on the nightstand, and I don't know if the phone is anything like mine. Mine's face recognition, so if I look at my phone, it opens it up. So basically, if somebody came into my house and they wanted to open my phone whilst I was asleep, all they would have to do was turn the phone and look at my face, point it at my face, and it would open it. Not the most secure way, but that's the way it is. So, you know, it's one of those things. But is her phone the same? And how does it end up with scribbles? Is it something she does herself? Because obviously we know about sleepwalking and things like that. So is this something like that she does? I guess we'll never know. So on to the next one. One night when my daughter was about 2.5, 3-year-old, we were home alone, talking just before she went to bed. So we decided to play a game where we gave all of her stuffed animals silly names. So after we named the last one, my daughter said, "But what's her name?" And I said something along the lines of, "We've already given them all names." And then she points to the blank wall and says, "No, we haven't named that girl." Now, I don't know if it was just an overactive imagination or something else. All I know is that it freaked me out enough to sleep with the lights on for the next few weeks. Because I do see, and we've mentioned it many times on the show, that children do see things that we don't. Is it over active imagination, or are children more susceptible to the paranormal than what we are? I lived alone in an old house in the historic district of Memphis. I'd often get woken up in the middle of the night to country music coming from the radio. Now, I personally don't listen to country music, and the radio had a dial, so I had to physically tune the station in. But after this, I had to do it every time this country music came on. So, is it again? So, is it a case of doing it when you're asleep, changing the dials? Is it paranormal? Is it something completely different? Is it a loose dial that tunes itself? Because if it's going to country music, then it's going from one station to another station. So is it just the dial that's a bit loose, and therefore it's dropping to another station or something? I don't know. So another one. One night my mum heard a crash noise in our kitchen, but figured I was up and I'd just dropped something. The next morning my dad walked downstairs and thought there was ice on the floor. But then realised that the ice wasn't melting because it was glass. So they cleaned up the glass, which was on the floor, on the countertops, and even under the lid of some of the countertops, along the top of some drawers and cabinets. It was as if someone stood back and actually threw a glass at the wall or something. We had no idea what it was from. The glass was too thick to be any of the vases or glasses or even some of the bowls in the house. We had a huge family meeting in the kitchen trying to figure out what happened and where the glass came from. We still have no idea. Now, as I've said, I'm not going to cast aspersions, but is that just a case of somebody breaking something in the kitchen and just won't admit to breaking it? I'm not going to tell anybody I did that. I'm sure there was a ghost playing tricks on me one evening. Whilst I was watching TV, sitting on my sofa. I had a rubber band in my hand and flicking across the room in an arc behind the TV. Next thing I know, it drops on my head. There wasn't enough power to bounce off the walls. I have no idea how it ended up on my head. Well, again, how far away from the TV were you? How much power did you put into it? She said there wasn't enough power to bounce it off the walls, but there was enough power to get it behind the TV. Now, if I sit in my house, and I'm just using my house as an example, and I was to fire a elastic band behind my TV, I'd have to put some force in it because I don't sit on top of my TV. So I'd have to put some force in. Would that force be enough to bounce it back? I don't know. Maybe I should give it a try and find out. Elastic bands on something that I keep around the house, so that's the thing. So we'll have to see if I can find an elastic band and give it a try. I have memories of me as a young child in a certain house with several bizarre things that happened. I have no logic explanation for them. The best I can do is explain them logically as hallucinations, but I have never experienced anything away from that house. The oddest one to me had to be with my new wallpaper. We had to change it. It had dinosaurs on it, and I would see dinosaurs marching around and killing each other. This happened during the same time several nights until we took it down. Items used to move and get thrown on their own accord. A particular favourite was a rocking chair. It would change positions and rock. One night when my grandparents were staying over, I awoke to find someone I didn't know in the chair who looked strange. A stuffed animal walked one time. I awoke with scratches that looked like nails. But I don't remember it that way. The scratches are really strange. Now, The wallpaper could be an overactive imagination, could be true. Remember, whatever opinion I give is my opinion, but it doesn't mean that the paranormal doesn't exist. It's just an opinion. So were the dinosaurs really killing themselves, or were they, or killing each other, should I say, or were they a dream? She saw the dinosaurs on the wall, so therefore did she have a dream that these dinosaurs were fighting each other? Scratches are a strange one, because scratches can often be you scratching yourself. I mean, I know as a baby you are given mittens, aren't you, to cover your hands to stop you from scratching yourself when you're asleep. So is that what was happening when this person was asleep? Did they scratch themselves? Again, we don't know for definite, but we can't rule out the paranormal because we don't know. I went to a Lincoln expert when I was very young. There was a rocking chair, and as soon as I saw it, I saw a woman in a period dress with brown hair, knitting and rocking in the chair. After like 2 seconds, the image vanished. I would attribute it to imagination, except the image was very vivid and clear, and I've never seen anything like it since. Diane sees Emily scratches herself when she's asleep. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I mean, as I say, as a child, you get given mittens, don't you, to stop yourself from scratching. So I'm presuming, people do scratch themselves when they're asleep. But this one about the image in the chair. So she went to an exhibit, and there's no more details on it. So was it a case of the exhibit portrayed this woman rocking in the chair? Or did this woman really appear rocking in the chair? Because sometimes exhibits do that, don't they? They project images onto something and make it move and this, that, and the other. So was that the case? When I lived in Minnesota, I would go over to my friend's house a lot. One day I was sitting on the couch watching TV, and I heard a girl screaming in my right ear. It was like she was screaming at the top of her lungs, but the volume had been turned down. So I wasn't deafened by the true volume of the scream. There was, however, nobody there. So I just wrote it off. Well, a week or so later, one of the guys whipped his head around and said, "I just heard a girl screaming." We both knew there was no one else in the house. I didn't hear a girl screaming, but then neither did anyone else when I actually heard the girl screaming the week before. I don't think she was mean or bad. I think she was just sad and lonely and wanted attention. And I felt bad that I couldn't reach out to her. The incident has never happened since. Could it be that someone was outside the house screaming? But then again, it was 2 occasions, but, could it be kids playing, whatever. I was playing some games late at night, and my dog was hanging out with me and started to bark when we were in the dark bedroom. When I went to check it out, I could hear fingernails scratching inside my bedroom closet. As I got closer, the scratching started getting quieter. The sound stopped when I was right in front of the door. Crash! Stuff started hitting the inside of the closet door. I ran straight outside. No way I was going to stay in there alone this time. 30 minutes go by and my buddy comes over to come check things out with me. I opened the closet to find all my clothes and hangers all over the floor of the closet. We searched every wall and ceiling for any secret openings. No secret doors were ever found. Was it a mouse? Was it some other animal? Was it, something wasn't hanging up right, and therefore, or was it, as I've said, paranormal? When I was younger, I was helping my aunt clean an office she was hired to clean. A lot of stuff happened there. The one that spooked me the most was when I was emptying a rubbish bin while my aunt vacuumed and my brother did the dishes. Suddenly a man's voice whispered in my ear, "Coo, coo, coo," kind of like he was playing with a toy gun. We were the only people there. Q, Q, Q. I've never heard a gun sound being pew, pew, pew. Maybe, but not Q, Q, Q. But, you know, I suppose people make different gun sounds, don't they? One day when my daughter was 2, we were having a typical terrible twos moment. She was throwing a bit of a tantrum for about 5 to 10 minutes, and we couldn't get her under control. At some point, she rather suddenly stopped and started staring at the wall. She then started slightly giggling. It was weird. 1 second she was crying and screaming, the next she was smiling and happy. Then she starts saying, "the funny lady," over and over. We asked her who she saw, and she pointed at the wall and again said, "well, the funny lady." When we asked her to describe who she was, she described my deceased grandmother. I mean, exactly described her. She'd never met her, and I don't think had ever seen a picture of her. Not that a 2-year-old could remember a picture. I am not much of a believer in the paranormal, but I know for sure that my daughter got a chance to meet my mum, and that makes me happy. That makes no sense, because she described my deceased grandmother, and then she says my daughter got a chance to meet my mum. I'm presuming it's just worded wrong, and she meant her mother and the child's grandmother. When I told this story to my parents, no, obviously not, they didn't seem as shocked as I was. When I tried to get a response from them, they looked at me and said, "I guess you don't remember that you met your grandfather when you were 3. The exact same thing happened to you 30 years ago." So she'd had a very similar experience when she was young. She'd seen her deceased grandfather. Going back to children being susceptible and whatever. Now, in my house, there is no pictures of my mother. Not because I don't want a picture of my mother in my house. It's because I probably don't have any. Well, I mean, I do have a couple, but, you know, none that I would put up on display and whatever. So if Harry, my grandson, came to my house and said he saw my mother, then I would question, you know, that, because there's no pictures. And as far as I'm aware, he hasn't seen any pictures. He might have done, I don't know. Plus he's only 2, so he's not really going to be coming to me and go, "Grandma, I just saw, you know, this woman." But most places have pictures of their family, whether it be their mother, father, grandfather, whatever. I know Aaron has pictures of me, his mother, and his grandparents in his house. I don't think he has a picture of his grandmother as in my mother, but that's simply because of the fact I don't think we've got any decent pictures of my mother. So I don't think he's got one. But you know, I mean, he never met his grandmother because he was 1 when his grandmother passed away. But he would know what she looked like because I have shown him pictures. Before my dad and my stepmom married, she'd come over and the hangers in the front closet would rattle non-stop while she was there. The clothes would be all over the floor when she left. Taking the hangers out would do no good. We entered the closet once and the door would shake violently when my stepmom came over. Now, it doesn't go into any more detail. Why is she your stepmom? Is the biological mum passed away? Because then, obviously, it go down the paranormal route of it's the original mother, the biological mother, who doesn't like the stepmother, or is checking to make sure that the stepmother is right for her children. Because I know when I first moved into this house that I live in now with my then wife, it belonged to her grandparents, and her grandfather passed away in this house. And when we first moved in, there was a door that used to open by itself. Now, you couldn't just push the door, you had to turn the handle to open this door, but this door used to open by itself on a night time. Now, was it people just hadn't closed the door properly? Because there was 4 of us living in the house, so we were backwards and forwards through this door quite regularly. So had it not been closed properly, or was it her granddad sort of? Because now I have nothing. There's no. I mean, I've done the whole paranormal activity in my house, and I've received nothing. The door no longer opens by itself. So was it the grandfather? Has he now accepted me and allowed me to live here, or was it just coincidental? I guess we'll never know. And because we have no further information about the mum and whether it was because, you know, she had what you call it, you know, the mother had passed and was basically just checking out this new stepmom. But so if you're listening, we need more information on that story. I was once showering with the door locked when I heard the blinds fall down. It freaked me out, so I pulled back the shower curtain to investigate. Now, I've always think, and it's probably psycho that's done this to a lot of people, but I always think that showers bring out the worst in people when it comes to being scared. As I say, I think it's probably psycho that's done it, because some people don't like going into showers. You know, it freaks them out because you get, you obviously when you're washing your hair and stuff like that, you're closing your eyes. And also if you have a shower curtain, you know, if you're not one of these that have glass doors in your showers and you have a shower curtain, then, you know, what is happening behind the shower curtain. So anyway, she pulls back the shower curtain to investigate. And I'm thinking, it's my brothers who tried to break in and play a prank on me, or something. Well, I mean, I'd play a prank on my 2 sisters, and my sisters, as I've mentioned in other shows, have played pranks on me. Breaking into their house, not really something I would do as a prank. You know, especially come through the window. So anyway, I put back the blinds. I put the blinds back up, sorry, on the window. The window was completely fogged over from inside, minus 1 solitary handprint. I finished my shower and told my family members. We all compared our handprints to that of the one on the window, and no one's was as big. The thing about handprints on condensation is if you put your hand on condensation, it can move. Your hand can move on the condensation, it can slip and whatever. So a handprint could appear larger than what it actually is. So if you put your hand on the window and it slips, then it looks like a handprint, but it's slightly bigger because you've slipped. So yeah, that's some stories of people who have experienced some strange things that can't be explained. And as I said, my opinion is exactly that. It's an opinion. It's not. I'm not saying that these didn't happen. I'm just saying that this is what it could have been, and you know, it could well have been something paranormal. Diane says, Diane's my sister, for those who don't know, has said, I have often thought of climbing through your 2 upstairs windows. Trouble is, I can't get higher than the 2nd step. Exactly. It's not something you would do, is it? You wouldn't, you know, if you played a prank on somebody, you wouldn't break into the house. You know, had this person put the handprint on the window, because remember they're in the shower, and shower causes condensation. Have they, when they've been putting the blind up, accidentally caught the window, and as I say, it slipped or whatever? You know, because it's just a handprint in condensation, it could have come from anywhere. I often wonder when people tell paranormal stories like this, why a ghost would, you know, put the handprint on something. and in just one handprint and not another one. And if you were climbing through somewhere, you would use both hands and this, that, and that. So I have to wonder. But as I say, it's an opinion. That's all it is. It's not the be all and end all. I wasn't there, so I can't comment. But it's good to hear your stories. We'll have some more in a moment, but for the time being, let's have a cabinet of curiosities.
Our world is full of the unexplainable. And if history is an open book, all of these amazing tales are right there on display, just waiting for us to explore. Welcome to the Cabinet of Curiosities. They were surrounded, and had been for months. The Ottoman Empire had been spreading westward for decades, and by 1683 it had arrived on the doorstep of Vienna, capital of the Holy Roman Empire. If the city fell, the dam would burst, and the Ottomans would roll through like a wave. They had sent for help, of course. King John III of Poland was most likely on his way with an army to free them, to push back the sea of red flags and golden crescents. But King John hadn't arrived, and they weren't sure how much longer they could hold out against an army of nearly 100,000 warriors. The siege of the city had been going on for 2 months now, and you have to wonder if the people of Vienna ever felt relief from that overwhelming sense of anxiety. They were in danger and at risk, and the thought that the Turks might breach the walls and kill them was all too real and present. It hung over them like a dark cloud, in fact. But the real danger wasn't above them. It was beneath the walls themselves. You see, the Turks had been using their time outside the city to dig tunnels. Rather than continue to launch themselves headlong into solid, sturdy walls, they had decided going under them would be more productive. So while the people of Vienna were waiting for help, their enemy was creeping up slowly beneath them. During the day, the soldiers inside the city watched and waited. They were observant and careful and patient. But at night, there were fewer eyes on the enemy army, and that's when the Turkish diggers did most of their work. They could make a bit more noise, and they had the cover of darkness to hide their movements in and out of the tunnels. Another group of people who worked through the night were the bakers in the city. If the people were going to have fresh bread each morning, that meant long nights of grinding, kneading, and baking it. And it was during one of those long, quiet nights when the bakers thought they heard something odd. It was almost like the sound of digging, but it seemed to be coming from nearby, which was impossible. And then it clicked. The digging was coming from beneath the building they were in, beneath the very city itself. They rushed out and alerted the soldiers on duty, and the warning was sounded throughout Vienna. When they routed the Turkish diggers and examined the tunnels, they were shocked to discover at least 10 large explosive devices, just waiting to be detonated. Somehow, against all odds, they had discovered their enemy's plan before it was too late and put a stop to the invasion. Soon after, King John of Poland arrived, and the city launched its counterattack against the Ottomans. And they won. They won the battle, and in the coming years, they put an end to the westward expansion of that red and yellow crescent flag. Those bakers were heroes, but they were also relieved citizens, and they wanted to celebrate right along with everyone else. So they got to work crafting a special treat, one that would mark their victory over the Turks. What they created was something new and different, a pastry designed to mimic the central icon of their enemy's flag. They called it the Kipfel, which meant crescent in German. It was a smash hit, too, so much so that it's still around today, although we know it by a different name entirely: the croissant. Henry worked on the same ship as his brother Sam, because that's what older brothers do, right? They walk a little ahead and hold the door open for the people they love. And boy, did Sam love Henry. They were young. Sam was 23, just 3 years older than Henry, and they were adventurous. They had managed to get work on a ship, and Sam had worked his way up to steersman. Their work took them all over, and they had a lot of fun meeting new people and learning new things. but there were also moments of trouble. One of their co-workers was a man named Brown, and Brown apparently had a checkered past as a troublemaker. In the course of their daily work, Henry discovered that Brown didn't care for him much, but he did his best to avoid the man, which he did until one day, while Sam was at the helm guiding the ship. That was when Brown lost control and punched young Henry. And that wasn't a good idea. Not only did Sam love his brother, but he was protective of him. When he heard of what happened, Sam walked away from the helm and left the ship on its own, located Brown, and then laid him out cold with a powerful punch. It solved one problem, but it created another. Sam and Brown couldn't stay on the same ship any longer. So when the ship docked for the night in the same town as Sam's older sister, he left the crew and spent the night in town. I imagine they had dinner that evening, caught up on everything that had already happened since they last spoke, and maybe shared some laughs. Eventually, though, Sam went to bed, and when he did, he fell into a dark, tense dream. In it, he was standing in the living room downstairs. All of the furniture had been pushed out of the way, and in the middle of the room was a coffin resting on a pair of chairs. The coffin was the sort that's been covered in a sheet of glossy metal, and the top half was open for viewing. So Sam crept closer. Inside, he found his brother Henry. He looked peaceful, and a small bouquet of white flowers rested on his chest. At the center of that white bouquet was a single red flower. Red, like blood. Sam awoke in a panic. He rushed to his sister's room, shook her awake, and then told her what he had seen. It was just a dream, she told him. It was nothing to worry about. But of course, dreams like that don't go away easily or quickly. The following day, Sam watched as the ship he had worked on for so long with his brother pulled out of port. He boarded a different one a short time later and followed Henry's ship from a distance. The plan was to wait until the captain could find a replacement for Brown, and then it would be safe for Sam to rejoin Henry on the ship. Except that never happened. On June 13th, an explosion rocked the lead ship, and 250 passengers and crew were instantly killed. One of the survivors, however, was young Henry. He had been thrown high into the air by the explosion and then landed in the water far from the ship. But he was brave, and even though he was injured and horribly burned, he swam back to save others. By the time Sam's ship arrived, Henry had been found and removed to a hospital for emergency care. His lungs had been scorched by the steam, and his body was broken to pieces inside. But he had saved so many others, and as a result, a number of crew had gathered to hold vigil around him as he slowly died before their eyes. And that's the scene Sam walked in on when he finally arrived. When Sam showed up the next day for the crew funeral, he walked into a large room filled with a dozen pale wooden coffins. All except one. In the middle of the room, resting on two chairs, was a metal coffin. Inside it, Sam found Henry. It turns out so many crew members thought of Henry as a hero that they all pitched in and upgraded his coffin. As Sam stood over his brother's body, people milled in and out of the rows of coffins, paying their respect. It was a somber moment, and the air was heavy with pain and grief. But in the middle of that, an elderly woman stepped through the crowd and approached Henry's coffin. Then, she placed a bouquet of white flowers on his chest and walked away. Sam glanced at them. Sure enough, right in the middle of the white flowers was a single red one. Red, like blood. The experience altered Sam's life completely. He wouldn't be content to work as a steersman for much longer. Instead, he wanted to leave his mark on the world, to create something beautiful by telling stories. And he did. I can't help but wonder if the loss of his brother fueled that lifetime of writing that he left behind for future generations to enjoy. Writings that included reflections of his time on the ship with his brother, dressed up in fictional characters, of course. Yes, that loss was painful, but it helped to create a man now known as a legend of American literature. Sam, you see, was Samuel Clemens, but most of us would more easily recognize his pen name. Mark Twain.
Mark Twain, probably one of the most famous American writers of the time. you listen to some of them stories, and they are quite surreal. Some of the things that they've done, as you know, like sort of the fact that he dreamt what happened to his brother, and then it was an inspiration for him to. The problem is he was a writer. Were the stories true? Did he really dream that dream? Or did he invent that to, sell his books and whatever? Again, something we'll not know, and, it's an opinion, and that's all it is. So anyway, I thought with strange facts like that, we would go into some real life strange facts. Now we've all heard the saying "Saved by the Bell," and it tends to be associated with boxing. If a boxer goes down and they start counting, but then the bell rings, they've been saved by the bell. But it's said to originate because people often got buried alive, and that to me doesn't really bode very well, because that is my biggest fear. Is to not be dead when I'm dead, and therefore end up either being buried alive or whatever. It's one of the reasons why I've chosen to be cremated. Now, the thing is, with cremation, it's exactly the same. I could be in the oven being cremated. Are they called ovens? That doesn't sound right. But, anyway, in the furnace being cremated, and I could still be alive. The difference between being buried alive and being cremated alive is, yes, you are going to feel intense pain, but it's going to be over rather quickly. Whereas to be buried alive, you're going to suffocate, and you're going to be in darkness and this and the other. So yeah, so they discovered that sometimes when they removed a coffin, because there's only so much land in the world, so therefore what they used to do was they used to dig bodies up to bury others. They obviously don't do that anymore, but this is what they used to do. And when they dug them up and opened the coffins, they would find scratch marks on the inside of the lid of the coffin. Obviously, people trying to get out. So it's said that they used to have a bell on the graveside and a rope leading down into the coffin, which was tied around the waist of the dead person, and therefore, if they were buried alive, then they could ring the bell and Saved by the Bell, because they had people doing what is known as the graveyard shift, which now just means night shift, but at the time it meant somebody sitting in a graveyard for the purpose of listening for bells, to dig the people up. So there you go. That's one interesting fact. Now, the French politician Maximilien Robespierre tried to shoot himself in the head, but only managed to shatter his lower jaw. Because he was facing execution, that's the reason why he tried to take his own life. So when he was eventually led to the guillotine by the executioner, they took the bandage off, which obviously meant the bottom half of his jaw, what he'd shattered, dropped, as it was, and he ended up screaming in extreme agony, which was only silenced when the blade of the guillotine fell. Now, Richard Klinkhammer, was a Dutch crime writer who became famous when he wrote a book about 7 ways to murder your spouse. And round about the same time as this book came to publication, his wife went missing. Now, Klinkhammer used to hint on TV and in magazines that he killed her, but it was never, or it hadn't been proven. But then it turns out that he actually had killed her, and it was 9 years later that it was discovered that he was the actual murderer. However, he only served 2 years in prison. He was sentenced to 7 years, for the murder of his wife, but actually only served 2 because he got out for good behaviour. Now, I've never understood this. He's murdered somebody, so how good do you have to be to get out of prison and good behaviour? Now, sometimes, going back to people who are dead, sometimes gas created due to decomposition of the body builds up, and it has enough pressure to cause a decomposing pregnant woman to actually give birth to the fetus. And it's actually known. It's a phenomenon so it happens so often that it's actually got its own name, and it's called coffin birth. It's actually been given a name because it happens so much. Now, you may have, or you may not have, watched a Netflix program recently called the Cecil Hotel, which tells you the strange story of the Cecil Hotel. 5 days after the LAPD released video of the last known sighting of the missing Canadian tourist Eliza Lam, who was visiting at the hotel, the other guests complained of a funny taste in the water, and Eliza's body was soon found in the hotel's water tank. To this day, it's still unsolved of how it happened. Did she, was she suffering from mental illness? Did she go to the roof, fall in the tank and drown? Was she? Because the video is quite strange, because she keeps looking out as if she's being followed. So did somebody kill her and put her in the tank? It's one of those things that, is unsolved, and it happened in the hotel where lots of things happened. And, if you watch the Netflix program, you will see about that. But yeah, it is a strange case. So in the 17th century, German philosopher Antheus Kircher invented an hypothetical cat piano. This instrument consists in a line of cats arranged according to the tone of their meows, their voices, with their tails stretched out underneath the keyboard so that they cry out when a key is pressed, which would drive a nail into their tails. How do these people, obviously you cannot judge history by today's ethics and whatever, but, how, even in those days, how did somebody not turn around and go, hold on a minute, you can't do that with cats? Because, obviously, it's still the harming of animals. And sometimes you do look back in history and look at some of the strange things that took place and wonder how, somebody would allow that to even happen. Obviously, it never came about as a musical instrument, so to speak, and died out as quickly as what it was invented. But it just seems strange that that somebody would allow, because surely people's feelings towards animals have always been the same. I love animals. I'd hate to see animals get harmed. So therefore, if I was to see that, I would obviously put, I'm talking about today's society, it would never happen anyway. But I would like to think that if I was in the 17th century and my mate came to me and said, "Oh, I've just invented this musical instrument, do you want me to play it?" And there he is tapping away on the keyboard and, plummeting nails into cats' tails. And I go, "I don't know, mate, you can't be doing that." But obviously somebody didn't say that to him because he did invent it. Now, Casa Merceau is a Sardinian cheese, and I probably said that completely wrong, but it actually contains live maggots. The maggots can jump up to 5 inches. Diane says cats were vermin in those days, so no one cared. Oh, I didn't know that. So yeah, I suppose, but still, I wouldn't like to do that to a mouse or a rat, which is obviously classed as vermin these days. But as I say, different society. So anyway, this Kasu Mizzou, the Sardinian cheese that has live the maggots could jump up to 5 inches out of the cheese whilst you're eating it. So it's a good idea to shield it with your hand to stop them from jumping in your eye. Well, it's a good idea just not to eat it. You know, live maggots. I couldn't think of eating anything live, never mind a cheese that's full of live maggots. And, you know, snails, l'escargot is snails that have been cooked, but I still can't think of eating them. So if it's got maggots in it, I just couldn't. But obviously some people do eat it because it's around. But no, I would never say about eating live maggots. As I say, I couldn't think of, you know, these, you see these trials on I'm a Celebrity, Get Me Out of Here, where they have the, that worm, I can't remember what it's called. That says, I've seen pictures of this cheese and you could not pay me enough to eat it. No, absolutely not. I couldn't eat anything that was live, which is why I'd be no good on I'm a Celebrity with them, you know, the ones where you have to bite the head off. And, or you can eat everything but the, I can't think of what they're called, these actual bugs. But witchetty grub, thank you, Diane. Yeah, the witchetty grub, where they eat it live. And it doesn't taste very nice to start off with, but then they're eating it live as well, which I just don't get. I don't get the whole, you know, why you would, but, you know, everybody their own, as they say. I suppose when you're hungry, you maybe would eat it because you're hungry, but you would have to be pretty hungry to eat something like that, wouldn't you? Now, crevices are V-shaped, so if you fall in, it is most likely it won't kill you immediately. You will get stuck and your body heat will slowly start melting the ice, causing you to slip down the crevice until you will no longer be able to expand your chest in order to breathe. So there we go. The crevice would save you originally, but your own body heat would melt the ice, which means you slip through it until eventually you're crushed because you can't breathe. Pleasant. Very nice, yes. I don't know. I would like to think that I never end up down a crevice, but you know, it obviously can happen. Now, a bobbit worm is a predatory worm that lives in corrals. Oh my, like some sort of cowboy film. Corals, not corrals. They can grow up to 10 feet long, and their jaws can chew through the coral. They come from eggs which can be dormant in corals, which you buy for your fish tank. So, if you buy coral to put in your fish tank, you could actually end up with eggs from the bobbit worm. They have strong jaws that can slice a femur in half. They are also covered in venomous spines, so they can appear out of nowhere in your saltwater fish tank, and they will chew tunnels through all your coral and slice your fish in half. They're also polychitous, so if you do somehow manage to slice its head off, it will just grow a new head, and the head will grow a new body, and they'll mate and make more worms. So basically, if you slice a bobbit worm in half, this must be where the story of slicing worms in half, and then because an earthworm, I always remember the story was, you know, you don't slice an earthworm in half because both halves become separate worms, but they don't. An earthworm dies if you slice it off, but this bobbit worm doesn't. So the body, so if you slice its head off, its body would produce a head, and the head you've sliced off would produce a body. They would then mate and make more worms. So basically, one worm would make two worms, which would make more worms. So the good idea is, if you come across a bobbit worm, don't try and kill it. And get rid of it some other way. You know, I mean, I don't know how you would flush it down the toilet, would you? I don't know. But if you flush it down the toilet, then with the sewers, and then, you know, we've seen what happens when things get flushed down the toilet and down the sewers. You know, that's why we've got the turtles and things like that. Obviously not real, but, you know, what would happen if you flush it down there? Would it, you know, draw extra things and whatever? I don't know. But yeah, if you come across a bobber worm, do not kill it by chopping it in half, because it will just become two, and then they will mate and make more. It's something out of a horror film, isn't it? You know, like, so you've been attacked by bobber worms, so you're slicing the heads off of them, and they're just reproducing left, right, and centre. The immune privilege protects your eyes from getting attacked and destroyed by your own immune system. If your immune system somehow received access to the inside of your eyes, it would attack and destroy your eye. If you damage one of your eyes, and if it is often removed and stays in your eye socket, your body will make antibodies against it, which will end up attacking and destroying your good eye. So if you end up with I suppose that's the reason why they remove an eye when it's destroyed for whatever reason, so that antibodies can't develop to then eventually attack your good eye. But your body wants to attack itself and destroy itself, which is strange, but true. Now here's something which, if you haven't already started itching, will make you rich. There is a microscopic mite that lives in your eyelashes. So basically, you have tiny creepy crawlies living right. So your immune system would attack your eyes, but if that's not creepy enough, you actually have microscopic mites that live right next door to your eye, in your eyelashes. So yeah, your whole body is just alive, isn't it? Now this one's quite sad. The crew of the Challenger shuttle were probably still alive after it broke up. In fact, they probably fell for approximately 2 hours and 45 seconds before actually plunging into the Atlantic Ocean at 321 kilometers an hour, which would have killed them. So there's a good chance that the crew was still alive, plummeting at that sort of speed. If the speed didn't kill them, then hitting the Atlantic Ocean at 321 kilometers an hour would definitely kill them, because they say it's like hitting a brick wall. If you fall from somewhere and you fall into water, it's like hitting a brick wall. If you've ever been to the swim baths and dived from a high board and hit the water, then you'll know what I'm talking about. Or belly flopped. If you've belly flopped off the side into the water, you know, it kind of hurts. Now, for all these people who have a bathroom and toilet combined, I'm lucky in the fact that my toilet and bathroom are separate. But all those that have a toilet and bathroom combined, if you leave your toothbrush sitting out in the bathroom, it will collect fecal matter when you flush the chain. Now that's because fecal matter, when you flush the chain, jumps 6 feet in the air. So it's always a good idea when you flush the toilet to actually close the lid of the toilet, because fecal matter will jump, but obviously if the lid's closed it can't. And especially if you have a bathroom toilet combined. Now babies in the womb can be startled and cry. However, there is no in there, as their lungs and airways are filled with the fluid until their birth, and thus they produce no sound. So babies in there are silently screaming and sobbing to themselves if they're scared. Now that's quite horrendous, you know, and not a pleasant thing to think that this little baby is crying, you know, or even screaming. I mean, when would a baby scream? You know, but yeah, it must be horrendous. I think that, you know, And how do these people know this stuff? This one's quite horrific. If you're attacked by a bear, it is likely that it won't kill you like other predatory animals. Like, for example, if you were attacked by a tiger, it would probably tear your throat out, etc. The bear, however, would actually just start to eat you when you're alive. So it would basically start munching on you whilst you're still alive. In 2011, a 19-year-old Russian girl was camping with her father, and both of them were attacked by a bear and its cub. The bear smashed her father's skull and killed him instantly. When she tried to run, the bear caught her and dragged her off, and she was slowly eaten by the bear and its 3 cubs over the course of several hours. As she was being eaten, she had managed to call her mother on her cell phone, and her mother had heard the whole thing as police and park rangers attempted to find her, but couldn't in time. So this woman is listening to her own daughter being eaten by a bear. Now that is stuff of nightmares, isn't it? To listen to your children or to listen to your child being ate and there being absolutely nothing you as a parent could do. I mean, even now, even though my children are fully grown, I still worry about them. My son's a wagon driver, so every time I see anything about wagon drivers, about having accidents and things like that, until I obviously find out where they are and things like that, I do get a bit panicky over it. My daughter lives down in London, so obviously anything that happens down in London, I get a bit of panic about. Is she safe? Is she anywhere near where it is, etc. But if either Amber or Aaron were to call me at the time of being eaten by a bear, or anything horrendous was happening to them, and there's nothing I could do about it, that would be worse than finding out they'd been eaten by a bear, because you're actually hearing it, and there's literally nothing you as a parent can do, and yet your job as a parent is to keep your children safe. Unit 731 was a Japanese complex that during World War II performed lethal biological and chemical experiments on over 3,000 people, carrying out some of the most notorious war crimes in Japanese history. In one experiment, to determine the treatment of frostbite, prisoners were taken outside in freezing weather and left with their arms exposed, which were then periodically drenched with water until it froze. The arm was later amputated. The arm was later amputated, and the doctor repeated the process on the victim's upper arm to the shoulder. After both arms were gone, the doctors moved on to the legs until only the head and torso remained. The victim was then used for plague and pathogen experiment. So once all your limbs are gone, and you are just your body and your head, that wasn't enough for them. They then still carried on experimenting on you. As a human being, I can't understand another human being harming another human being. I don't get over. I can't get the concept. I get the concept of fighting, and that's not what I mean. I get the concept of sometimes, you fights happen and this and the other, but I don't get the concept such as that of purposely harming another human being just as an experiment. I just don't see, well, any living being. Animal testing and stuff like that. I just don't get. I'm not one of these who stands outside of a lab with a placard and this that, and the other, but I just don't see how one human, going back to the cat piano, even though they were classed as vermin, I still don't get the whole let's harm animals, humans, whatever. You'd have to be some kind of really sick individual to do something like that, wouldn't you? But anyway, at any point in time, one of the proteins in your brain cell can misfold and cause a prion disease, and we don't just know why it happens. Prions are basically indestructible. Prions are so difficult to destroy that after autopsy, if a dead person is confirmed to have prions, all equipment that was used during that autopsy must be destroyed. It was the Japanese, Diane's asking who did the experiment, because she missed it because her husband came and was talking to her. During World War II, they used to experiment on people, and they used to take them outside in freezing cold weather and pour water on them. And they used to start with an arm, then the other arm, then the legs, and then even when all the extremities was destroyed, the legs and arms, they would then still carry on using experiments for plagues and pathogens on the torso and the head. So they would still carry on right up until the person was dead, basically. And then I'm presuming they would just burn the body. But yeah, that's what I was saying. I can't understand why people, can do that to another human being. But these prions, if they ever, if anybody's discovered to have a prion, then all the equipment must be destroyed. Now this one I have heard about. Koalas can give you chlamydia, and this is by weeing on you. So if you get close to one, it could end up badly. Yeah, absolutely, Diane says, thank goodness for the Geneva Convention. Absolutely. Half of Australia's koalas have chlamydia. I mean, I don't know how they work out, it's half, but half of them have chlamydia. And they pass it on to a human by weeing on them. So therefore, don't let koalas wee on you would be a good start, wouldn't it? So the Colombian serial killer Pedro Alonso Lopez, who is known as the Monster of Andes, raped and murdered over 300 girls from Ecuador, Peru and Colombia. However, after he was caught and imprisoned for 18 years, he was put into a psychiatric hospital. There he was reviewed, declared to be sane and set free again, in spite of his blatant avowal that he fully intends to kill again. Since he was released in 1998, nobody knows where he is or what he's doing. So he could have carried on killing, he could have disappeared, could be dead by now, but nobody actually knows where he is or what he's up to. Patients with Charles Bonner syndrome may see small people and animals, bright moving shapes or distorted scary faces. Many people call this syndrome a portal to a parallel reality. So if you suffer from Charles Bonner or Bonnet syndrome, then you could see things. How do you get diagnosed with that you've got it? I don't know. So after a man received, and now I've heard this story as well, after a man received a heart transplant from a suicide victim in South Carolina, he went on to marry the donor's widow. And then eventually, now that could be that this heart was in love with this woman, and therefore he, feeling through the heart and whatever, fell in love with the woman again. But then eventually he killed himself in the exact same way as the donor had 12 years ago, or 12 years earlier. In the early 1900s, New Englanders experienced a vampire panic caused by the spread of tuberculosis. They dug up their ancestors who had died of disease and burned their organs, cut off their heads and drove stakes through their heart. The disease was called consumption because it consumed your body. And that's why they thought people were, being attacked by vampires, because they were being eaten from the inside, as it was. So to ensure of that, I mean that there is a story of a young lady, I can't remember her name, in the US. She's actually classed as the first US vampire, or supposedly vampire. And Bram Stoker, the writer of Dracula, actually was very interested in the story, and it sort of paved the way for the story of Dracula. It was part of what he based Dracula on, such as, because if you read the story of Bram Stoker, the way to destroy a vampire is to burn it, to remove its head, or to drive a stake through its heart. Exactly as they did in New England back in the 1900s. In the 16th and the 17th centuries, many Europeans, especially them who were wealthy, because obviously the wealthy were quite strange, used to consume parts of the human body. This included bones, the skull, and even blood. And they did this because they believed it cured them of diseases. The term they used for this medicinal cannibalism, fat and bones, the term used for this is medicinal cannibalism, sorry. Fat and bones were often extracted from corpses, even Egyptian mummies, for the same purpose. For example, powdered human skull mixed with chocolate were used to treat bleeding. As far as human blood was concerned, it had to be as fresh as it could be. The Devil's Bible, also called the Codex Gigas, is a legendary Latin manuscript that's said to be the product of a monk's bargain with Satan himself. In the 13th century, a monk was about to be executed for his crimes unless he could compose a single impressive work in one night. To achieve this impossible task, the monk is said to have sold his soul to Satan and produced this 165-pound, 3 feet long book. While that's just a legend, the Devil Bible does exist as real text and appears to have been written completely by the hand of one person. Hundreds of years ago, when people died on the battlefield or elsewhere outside, their bodies often lay where they fell and just rotted away. As they decomposed, their skulls would start to grow moss called usnea. People believed that this moss contained the spiritual qualities of the fallen soldiers, and they would gather it up as medicine. Apparently usnea that grew on a hanged man's skull was seen to be the most effective. Now, could it just be the moss was the medicine? It had nothing to do with the actual thing that it was growing on. It just happened to be growing on the skull of a dead person. Or was it? Was it the skull was the skull was the factor in it? Unless you want to try it, and maybe get some usna which is grown elsewhere, and then try some usna which is on a skull. I guess we'll never know. But there you go. 25 strange but creepy, strange but true facts, which is quite strange. So we'll go on to people's glitches. So this is glitches in the Matrix, as they say. Now, we often say, it's been said many times, and obviously the film The Matrix talks about it, where there's glitches in the Matrix and you see things that you're not meant to see and stuff like that. Because the same we don't live in a real world, we live in a Matrix. If you've seen the film Matrix, and I'm not spoiling it by telling you this because they reveal it early on, the Matrix is a made-up reality. The reality itself is destroyed, and they make a Matrix which people are, born into, or people are shown through projection to make it look like it's the real world, but the real world is actually run by, in the film, it's run by machines, but, you know. So anyway, here's stories about glitches in the Matrix. Have you ever experienced a glitch in the Matrix? I don't think I have. I may have, but I don't think I have. I can't think of a time when I've experienced a glitch in the Matrix, but that doesn't mean that I haven't. It just means that I can't think of one that I have. So anyway, I had an Android phone which had Google Cards featuring options that could notify you, you know, such as, and mine does this, when I start my car, my phone will tell me how far away I am from home. So it'll say you have 20 minutes to go, and this and the other. Well, this one said things like 15 minutes to home if you were out. I thought this was annoying, and it is, you know, and useless. It can be useless in the fact of, if I'm somewhere and I'm not travelling home, but it's telling me how far away home is, then I do think, well, you know, I don't really need to know that. But over the years, I've just, you know, let it go because I'm not really that bothered. But this person switched that feature off. After several months of no card notification, one night I'm at home and a card pops up saying that I'm 35 minutes to home, pitting me at some random crossroads on the other side of town. I think that's weird. I'm not even way over there. I don't even know where that is. I've never been to that area. And I go to my cards and into the settings, and they are turned off. So, thinking it's just weird, you know, just carry on. The next night, the exact same thing happens. 35 minutes away from home, at the same place. So, still not being to that particular area. And again, check the notifications, all turned off. Well, a few days after this, a friend and I are out running errands, and he misses the intended exit, so we take the next one. Once on the street, I ask, where are we? I've never been here before. Suddenly, out of nowhere, a car turns right and crashes into us. My friend who was driving was unable to turn, so he pulled forward to the curb to call a truck. I called my sister to come and pick us up, and when my sister asked me for the location, I look up and the street sign tells me what the Google card has been telling me them 2 nights, and yet I'd never been there before. I was 11 or 12, and it was in the early 1970s. Dad came home one Friday and announced we were going to Kings Island, which is at the time was a fairly new amusement park. I begged him to let me invite my friend Chris to go along. He said okay, as long as Chris could pay his own way. So I thought, great. And off to the phone I went and picked it up, and there was no dial tone. Hello, John, is that you? It was Chris. I was just calling you, what's up? I was calling to ask if you'd like to come to Kings Island tomorrow, but you have to pay your own way. No phone ever rang. We both called each other at the same time to ask the exact same thing. Well, I don't know if it was being asked the exact same thing, because this Chris wouldn't know that his family was going to the amusement park. So why would Chris ring up? I can get that they probably rang each other at the same time, but not ask the same thing. Has it ever happened to you? Have you ever picked up the phone and you've spoke to somebody who've actually tried ringing you? Is it a case of whoever's rang who, they've rang first, so when you've picked up the phone it's already connected because you've picked up the phone, made the connection, and therefore, you know, you've already connected? I can't think of a time that it's happened with me. I mean, I know there's been times when I've thought about ringing somebody and then received a phone call from them, but I've never actually tried ringing somebody and, haven't had to ring them because when I picked up the phone, they've already been there. So I was going down the stairs one night and went past my brother who was coming up the stairs. I said hi, and he sort of just mumbled back. I reached downstairs and walked through the kitchen, only to find my brother standing in the kitchen. And I still, to this day, can't wrap my head around what was going on that night. One of my friends, it was probably a skinwalker, so I don't know what to believe, him or my prayer. Now, all you paranormal experts out there will have to tell me what a skinwalker is. Well, in fact, let's have a look. Let's see what a skinwalker is, because I have no idea. I've never ever heard that phrase before, so I don't know what a skinwalker is. A skinwalker is a type of harmful witch who has the ability to turn into, possess, or disguise themselves as something else, such as an animal. Well, I'm presuming obviously as a human being as well. But yeah, I've never heard that phrase, skinwalker. Something new every day is a school day. I was once showering, and after about 10 minutes of shower, I heard something ping and hit the floor. I looked down and I saw a penny. I was pretty perplexed, as you can imagine, but I figured, whatever, I'll just keep it, as I thought it would bring me good luck. See a penny, pick it up all day, have good luck and all that. I kept the penny in my wallet for a few years in a zip side pouch. I never really told anyone because it was kind of pointless to talk about a random penny. But I was very superstitious about it. About a few years later, when I was at a musical festival, a girl in our tent woke up to a penny to a penny in her butt crack. Why? Why? We all laughed it off as having a wild day. However, I remembered the penny I had, and when I looked in the zip pouch, I was shocked to find it was gone. I told my friends and they didn't believe me. I think they threw that penny away too. So is that not just somebody playing a bit of a prank? They know the penny's there, or they found his wallet, to get some money to play that particular prank, and they've come across this penny and they thought, oh, that's perfect. It seems like a random thing, it's in that butt crack. This one is more silly than creepy. But once when I went to my grandma's, when I went with my grandma, to her friend's house, I was on the porch by myself with the grandmother's friend's cat, and the cat looked me right in the eyes and said the word meow. Right? However, it didn't sound like a cat meowing at all. It sounded very convincingly like a... Just going back to that, the penny in the butt crack. Sonia's just put in the chat room, Penny Lane. Yeah, exactly. But anyway, but it didn't sound like a cat. It sounded very convincing, like somebody actually enunciating the word meow. 2 syllables in their most thoroughly unconvincing cat voice. Like someone intentionally doing a very poor impersonation of a cat as a joke. But it was perfectly in time with the movement of the cat's mouth, and there was no one else around, so it had to have been the cat saying it. Well, I have a cat. Well, I used to have 2, but now I have a cat, and my cat actually talks to me, or it sounds like he's talking to me, in the fact of he'll sort of go, and it does sound like he's actually having a conversation. Now, I don't know what it means. There's no word, you can't make out the words that he's saying, but that's what he sometimes says. He'll go, no, it's a bit like the old announcement that used to be on BBC many years ago. Jolly says, that's pretty much exactly what my cat does. So I don't know if it's telling me to make sure I look both ways before I cross the road, or don't go to You know, don't talk to strangers in the park and things like that. For those of you who are now totally confused about what I'm saying, that was what Charlie the Cat used to say in the adverts, you know, about talking to strangers and making sure you look both ways before you cross. And they were public service announcements, that's what they were. But yeah. So my mum told me my cousin died from an overdose a year before he actually did. So when she told me and I replied, yeah, from an overdose, right, she was shocked that I already knew. I thought she was so messing with me until she showed me his death date, and I still can't really explain that one. So her mum must have told her that the cousin had died from an overdose. But then he did actually die from an overdose. Or she can remember her mother telling her that the cousin had died from an overdose. But then a year later, they found out that he did. So I'm a security guard at the distribution warehouse. Sometimes I have to work graveyard shift. Remember what we said about the graveyard shift earlier on, working the night shift. During this time, the only people on the premises is me and a rare truck driver bringing in the late load. Our guard shack is concrete with a sliding glass door on the sides and has no locks and a big window in the front and back. Sometimes when I'm the only person on the premises, I see a reflection of someone walking past the shack. Every inch of this shack and the yard is covered by security cameras, but yet nothing is shown up on the footage when I see these reflections. Now, I know a story about an incident, because I used to be a security officer many, many years ago, and I guarantee it definitely wasn't me. However, the building that I worked in, one of the security guards rang the police because he said he saw somebody in one of the shops. So he informed the control room, and basically the control room said, stay where you are and watch them and see if they, you know, see where they go, or try and escape, whatever, and we'll call the police. So they called the police. Police turned up. As the police turned up, they'd also called the key holder of the place. There was no alarm going, but they called the key holder because obviously the police needed to be in, and you know, you don't just go to the shop and break the window to get in, you know, when you've got a key holder. So the key holder and the police turn up. They walk in the back door and turn all the lights on. And this person who was robbing the place, supposedly, disappeared. It turns out the security guard had saw his own reflection in something inside the shop. Let's say a mirror, and presumed it was somebody robbing the place, but it was actually him. So yeah. So was that a case of that as well? That the security guard had seen the reflection of himself and just assumed that it was somebody? Because how many times my back kitchen, or my kitchen, not necessarily back kitchen, but my kitchen or my living room, dining room, if I was to switch the light off, are quite dark. But if I have a light on from the living room, then it shines into the kitchen and the dining room, but doesn't light the room up, it just shines into it. And if I was to walk past one of the windows, the reflection of me would appear in the window. And there has been times when I've like turned because I saw a reflection in the window, but it turned out to be just my reflection. So was that the same with the security guard? Did he see his own reflection? And that's why it didn't show up on the cameras, because there was nothing to show up, it was a reflection. When I was about 15, I was eating some cereal and I accidentally dropped my spoon onto the kitchen floor. I watched the spoon fall, and as it hit the floor, it just vanished into thin air. I was shocked. I thought surely my eyes were playing tricks on me. It must have just bounced away and gone out of sight or something. I spent 30 minutes searching the kitchen for that spoon. I was honestly kind of freaked out. I tried to think of every possible place it could have gone. There weren't any places it could have ended up, and I never ever found that spoon. Did it bounce away? Did it bounce under a unit? You know, but well, I guess we'll never know. This wasn't all that weird, I guess, but still. When I was a kid, there was this house right before the entrance to my subdivision that was in this super deep valley. I remember calling it the house in the hole, and thinking about how much it must have sucked when it rained, and how great of a sled nail the sides would make. Then one day we were passing it, and there was no valley. It was at the same level as the road. I asked my mum what was happening to the hole, and she had no idea what I was talking about. To this day, I no longer live there, but I always check whenever I drive past. That's got me baffled. What they mean? Do they mean that it was in a valley, and or do they mean it was on a hill, and then the hill's gone and it's flat? I'm not sure about that one. So we'll find one before we play the next cabinet of curiosities. It was 4 in the morning, and I was headed downstairs to grab something to drink. The kitchen is separated from the living room by a dividing wall, but I realise someone is in there because I can see a person's shadow from around the corner. So I think to myself, oh, my roommate must be up already. Maybe he has something to do. So as I turn the corner, I say, hey John, good morning, and immediately I feel like an idiot and get a chill up my spine because there's no one in the kitchen. I searched the entire first floor of the house and frantically found no one there. So I headed back upstairs and knocked on my roommate's door. However, he did not answer. So when I opened the door, there I found my roommate fast asleep, and it doesn't seem like he's waking up anytime soon. There is no way he could have made it back up to his room that fast without running, and I would have noticed because the floors are creaky, especially on the staircase when he woke up this morning. I told him about what had happened. His eyes got real wide and he turned pale. He looked me right in the eye and said, that isn't a funny joke. Don't mess with me. Turns out he had been having bad dreams all night about someone in the house who shouldn't have been there. But whenever he confronted the person, he could never see their face. All that was there was a black silhouette. I haven't had that experience since, and we agreed not to talk about it again. Now, we had a very similar story a few weeks ago about this, and could it just be the roommate messing around? Could it be that he did go downstairs and then, you know, I mean, how many times did you do it with your parents, where your parents would look in your bedroom and you'd be lying in, you know, pretending to be asleep, etc. And I'm sure kids still do it to this day. So was his roommate messing around? Again, I guess we'll never know. But whilst you're contemplating that, let's have a cabinet of curiosities.
Our world is full of the unexplainable. And if history is an open book, all of these amazing tales are right there on display, just waiting for us to explore. Welcome to the Cabinet of Curiosities. On a cold December night, Mary vanished. She had left a note describing a last-minute trip north and then seemed to have fallen off the edge of the world. Mary's friends and family began asking around, but no one had seen any sign of her. Her own husband, a retired colonel, tried pulling a few strings, but she still remained undiscovered. It wasn't until a couple of days later when her car was found that people really began to worry. The car had been abandoned, along with clothing and her ID, on a small country road. Those with overactive imaginations began to suspect something more than a simple mistake or even a practical joke. They believed Mary had been kidnapped, possibly even killed, and they knew just who had committed the crime. Mary's husband. You see, he was already in a bit of hot water, so to speak. A few months earlier, he had requested a divorce from Mary, and in the weeks since, they had been fighting constantly. He had found another woman, and Mary was standing in the way of that happiness. If you'd asked, some of them might have even suggested that he was a bit resentful of that. It was easy to connect the dots and label him as a suspect. Which is what the police did. They questioned him and his mistress, but in the end, they didn't think that he had committed the crime. And in the meantime, search parties were expanding their reach. At one point, at least 1,000 law enforcement officials and 15,000 civilian volunteers painstakingly examined the region Mary had disappeared from, all while being shadowed by a number of airplanes. Her disappearance was covered by the New York Times. Celebrity mystery writers even got involved, spinning their own theories of what happened. And one man hired a medium to examine one of Mary's gloves in hopes that it would lead them in the right direction. But it didn't work. Don't worry, though. The story does have a happy ending. And that's because 11 days after she vanished, Mary was found over 230 miles to the north. She'd checked into a hotel under a different name and claimed she had no memory of the entire ordeal. Some people believed Mary was telling the truth, that yes, she had somehow lost touch with reality for a week and a half. Psychologists call it a fugue state, where a person going through a traumatic experience subconsciously creates an entirely new reality where the stress no longer exists. But others thought there was something more going on. They believe Mary actually knew what she was doing, and that the purpose behind the whole ordeal was to have her husband charged with her murder. People who believe this theory claim that once he had been executed for her murder, she would have strolled back out of the darkness and claimed amnesia. They believe, in a sense, that Mary was a master of deception and planning, something pulled straight out of the pages of a dime store novel. But like a lot of things in life, we'll never know for sure, because she never talked about it or explained herself ever again. It was all just one big mystery. Whatever the truth was, she recovered nicely enough. She went on to marry an archaeologist, which I find rather ironic because archaeologists, at the basic level, are really just people who dig around for clues that tell a story. And Mary's life was built around clues. In fact, without her, popular literature wouldn't be what it is today. She's still the best-selling author in history, ahead of J.K. Rowling, Stephen King, and even William Shakespeare, with over 2 billion books sold. Nearly everything she wrote has been adapted in some form or another. And you've heard about her your entire life, just not as Mary. That's because she has been, still is, and always will be, the queen of the mystery novel. Agatha Mary Christie. Peter Carpin was a spy. There was no question about it. He'd been captured by the French as he was trying to slip into their country in 1914, just as the First World War was beginning. Maybe his papers were clearly forged, or perhaps there was something about his accent, or the way he shifted his eyes when they asked him questions. We don't know why he was captured, only that he was. Which meant that the French had a problem on their hands. They could toss him in jail, which they did right away. But then what? Alert the Germans that their spy had been captured? That was only going to force them to send another spy, or perhaps more than one. The French would have to be more diligent with their border patrols after that, and no one wanted to do that. There were too many other things that needed their time and resources. There was another option, though, but it was risky. Someone proposed actually keeping Peter Carpin's capture a secret from the Germans. They could send fake intelligence reports back to the man's superiors in Berlin and try to fool them into believing that Carpin was doing his job. So that's what they did. For 3 years, they sent back reports, and for 3 years, the Germans replied with more instructions and requests. Of course, the French were feeding the Germans one false report after another, but the Germans hadn't noticed. They were even making military decisions based on those false reports. It was brilliant. It gets better, though. You see, Peter Carpen needed an income to survive in France, so the Germans were sending him money on a regular basis. Sometimes it was for his own personal expenses, while other times it was funding for the projects that they were tasking him with. And every time Germany sent that money, the French were intercepting it and putting it into a bank account. In 1917, though, Peter Carpen escaped. I don't know how, but he managed to slip out of wherever they were holding him and vanish into the depths of France. More than likely, he was going to head straight back to Germany, but without his money and papers, that was going to take some time. Oh, and speaking of money, that was when the French decided to spend the cash they'd been covertly stealing from the Germans. They bought a brand new car with it. Fancy, right? A few years later, in 1923, France sent forces to an area of Germany that the Treaty of Versailles had declared to be a demilitarized zone. The Germans had failed to make all of the World War I reparation payments that they had agreed to, and had instead formed a sort of passive resistance that was creating tension. The French arrived as a sort of peacekeeping measure. They brought the car with them, which was a bit poetic, I think. A car purchased by the French with German funds, and now it was in Germany. Now, I don't know the exact circumstances, but at some point in the French occupation there in 1923, that car was involved in an accident. Maybe it was used in crowd control, or perhaps it was just being driven through the streets like anyone today would enjoy. Whatever the reason the car had for moving, it tragically struck a German citizen down, throwing him to the ground like a ragdoll. The French driver of the car quickly climbed out, panic and grief painted across his face, and approached the body of the man he'd hit. It was too late, though. The man was dead. Checking his papers for anything that would help them contact the man's relatives and inform them of the tragic accident, the French soldiers discovered something amazing. This man they had hit, the one who now lay dead in the street after being struck by the German-funded automobile, wasn't the random stranger they expected him to be. In fact, they knew him. It was the spy himself, Peter Carpen.
Now, the story of Agatha Christie, I remember many, many years ago being told it by my mother about her disappearing. I think it was when we went to London to watch like sort of a chorus line or something like that. Mousetrap was on the stage, and my mother was telling us the story of Agatha Christie. It has been featured in a few films. The 1979 film starring Vanessa Redgrave as Agatha Christie, simply called Agatha, said it, as Aaron just mentioned, said it could be a plot to get back at her husband, and apparently her heirs, Christie's heirs, tried to sue the film to prevent it from being distributed, because obviously they didn't want information like that getting out. But the most famous one that I saw is the Unicorn and the Wasp, the Doctor Who episode, which talks about the Agatha Christie disappearance. Obviously, it's fictional because it's about a wasp that has psychic abilities, and Christie has a temporary breakdown due to the connection in the psychic with this wasp, and that's how they explain it in Doctor Who. Obviously, as I say, it's very fictional because Doctor Who is fictional. But there you go. But yeah, I always remember being told the story of Agatha Christie when I was just a young boy. So anyway, let's get back to some glitches in the Matrix. Now, this could be put down, I suppose, as a Mandela effect, because when I was little, I used to have a Thomas the Tank Engine book which had fold-out ports and flaps. There was this one port which was like a shed, and you could lift the flap to see inside of it. Inside was all the usual garden shed paraphernalia. But there was also a black cat sat inside of it. But I swear that black cat was not always there. I loved that book, but every time I read it, I would get to that page and guess whether the cat would be there or not. I don't have a clue what that was all about, but it creeped me out as a young. So, was the cat there? Was the cat not there? Was it a Mandela effect? Was the book designed like that? So sometimes you saw the cat, sometimes you didn't. Because obviously things like that can happen. I've never read a Thomas the Tank Engine book, and especially not a fold-out one, so I can't comment on what is in that book. But long ago when I was a kid, my younger brother and me were driving our bikes along the embankment alongside the river, and there was a huge dam thing on the river. I grew up in this town and never knew we had a dam. When we got home, I told my mother that was the first time I had ever seen the dam, and she didn't know what I was talking about. Later I returned to the spot, and there was nothing there. My brother does not remember, but I have seen it as clear as day. I'm not sure it was my imagination, but it's strange I did not dream it. Since my brother remembered that we were there, he just doesn't remember the dam. Now, could it be he saw something that wasn't there? It's a strange thing that he saw it once and then never saw it again, and the brother who was with him never saw it. It is quite a strange one. But no, man. I once was cleaning some screws at work and I put them in a little plastic cup. I poured some acetone over them and turned away to do something else. When I turned back around, the cup was gone and the screws were sitting on the desk, completely dry. I figured I must have mixed something up, repeated, and again the same thing happened. I was really confused and thought someone was missing me, and someone informed me that it was probably due to a chemical reaction. Acetone was dissolved in the little plastic cups and then evaporating. Now, I've used acetone and it is quite a dangerous substance. It can dissolve things like plastics, and especially if it's just a small, one of these cups that you get in a water cooler thing. It could, dissolve one of them. So it could be that. But then again, if it's, and it does evaporate quite quickly, so there's always that as well. So it could well have been that. But obviously it was enough to spook them out. So I was sitting on my porch and I had my debit card on the table in front of me. I went inside to get something to drink. I had patio furniture and 6 feet of private fencing around the yard. Yeah, true. Dad says, why didn't I do it again and watch? Yeah, that would have been the sensible thing. And if somebody says to you, this is what's happening, and you could do it and go, oh yeah, it is. So yeah, it does make sense to actually do it. So anyway, this person had patio furniture and 6 feet of fence around the yard. I also lived alone and went back outside and it was just gone. I searched everywhere inside and out, but I couldn't find it. Nothing was ever withdrawn from my account, so 2 days later I cancelled it and requested a new one. 2 weeks later, I went out to sit on the porch and the old card was sitting right there on the table, as if it had just appeared. There was nothing else on the table. It was just gone and then it wasn't. Well, that's how things are lost, aren't they? I mean, I've done it myself. I've thought I've put something somewhere, gone looking there. In my mind's eye, I can see it in that particular spot, and then I've gone to that particular spot and it's not there. I've also had experiences where I've gone somewhere, looked for something, couldn't see it, gone somewhere else, looked at, and then gone back to the original place and had been there. Exactly the same as what they're talking about with the card there. So it must have been there, I've just not seen it for whatever reason. So yeah, I've experienced similar things, but I wouldn't put it down as a glitch or anything. I would just say that, I hadn't seen it or whatever. Because sometimes when you look at something, you can't, you know, it's like the old saying, you can't see the wood for the trees. Um, you're looking at something, but you're not really seeing what you're looking at because your mind's, you know, elsewhere. I mean, how many times have you walked into a room and thought, why have I walked into this room? So, you know, not long after 9/11 on Friday, I got up to go to class and I had one of those moments. I brought a glass, getting something to drink, tripped over something, going to my car, was late to class due to a wreck on the way there. While at school, we heard about a plane crashing, some of the wings blown off. I went to work and then went home. The next morning, my roommate wakes me asking if I'm skipping the class today. He tells me that it is still Friday, and so I get up and go to class. Soon I noticed that the glass I broke is not broken. On the way, I pass the same wreck in the same spot, and all day I wait to hear about the plane, but it never happens. So it ends up being kind of a normal day. So, was that a dream? But if it was a dream, how did the dream about the crash? I don't know. This is quite a strange one. I mean, if it's not long after 9/11, then you're probably thinking about plane crashes. So you could, you know, think about things that have happened. I mean, I know when the Lockerbie disaster happened, I live on the flight path of the plane that, well, Stanley, not me, just me, you know, it's not like it like just flew over my house. But Stanley was on the Lockerbie flight path, or the plane that crashed at Lockerbie, it's on the flight path. So for a time after that, every time I saw a plane, I would obviously panic because of what happened. I mean, I don't know what I could do, you know, if something happened, if a plane could crash into my house, there's not really a lot I could do about it, but, you know, so, you know, it played on my mind. Whether I dreamt about it or not, I don't know, but I might have done. But then it's the, you know, the dropping of the glass, that could be anything, that could be dreaming about the dropping of the glass, but it's the accident. How did the accident happen? If it was a dream, that's the bit that, you know, is the strange bit. The rest can all be put down to dreams, you know, or imagination or whatever. But the wreck, the car accident couldn't, because how could you dream about a car accident that happened? Unless it was one of those places where it was prolific for car accidents, and you just, you know, you dreamt about a car accident there, and there was a car accident there, but it's somewhere that had lots of car accidents. So, you know, your mind automatically assumed it was going to car accident. Was it the exact same car accident that they saw? Before my husband and I were married, we lived separately. He would come over and spend time, then leave late at night, around about 11, 12 o'clock. He left one night, and my front door, which has 3 locks, I lock on the knob, a deadbolt, and what I call a hotel lock. Basically, it's a lock that you flip the long piece over onto the shore peg, and then the door can only be opened a few inches. So basically like a chain, isn't it? I've seen them, they're like solid, but obviously you have chains as well, don't you, that you can hook on when you open the door. I have never in my entire life ever used that, and yet on films people use them all the time. And I'm 54 in a couple of weeks, and as I say, I've never ever used that particular type of chain, or, you know, the hotel lock as they call it, to open the door. But never mind. Well, he left and used his key to lock the knob and the deadbolt. But I thought to myself, I have to go and lock the hotel lock. I come down and it's already locked. And there's obviously no way he could have done it from outside. Now, the chain lock would be very difficult to put on, because obviously you have to lift the chain with the thing on and put it into the slot, etc. But one of those, could it be that it wasn't quite pushed out of the way, so as they closed the door, it's caught and flipped it across? As I said, these are all opinions. Doesn't mean I'm right. So one day when I was 10 years old, I was in my grandma's front yard. She keeps her yard immaculate and award worthy. It was dusk and we were having a family get together. My mum says, toss me the car keys, which I obviously do. My throat is short, and I assume they landed in the short grass, but we never ever found them again. And that was 30 years ago. The yard has been mowed hundreds of times. The house is still in the family, and still no one has ever found the keys. Now, over time, obviously rain, this, that, and the other, they could have been drudged into the ground, into the mud, and that's the reason why. Why they didn't find them straight away is the strange part, not the bit over time, because as I say, wet ground, people walking on it could have, squished into the mud, etc., and what have you. But why they never found it when they were doing it, and then they were mowing the lawn. Couple more, and then we'll have to call it a night. So anyway, a few months before my first car accident, I dreamt about it happening. Everything from the sounds to the placement, the smell were the same. The thing is that the girl driving tried to get me to find a different ride because she didn't want to do any extra driving that day. And after the crash, I told her about my dream, and she said she had the same one the night before, and that's why she didn't want to drive. Sounds very suspicious, like Final Destination, doesn't it? I could be wrong. It could have actually happened. I could have had the dream, whatever. But sometimes when I see things like that, I think, yeah, that's Final Destination. That they just took the story from Final Destination and made it their own, as it was. My partner and I have the same vivid memory of something happening that never actually happened. We are both convinced that our friend was with us at another friend's wedding and he fixed the sound system during the reception. Except the friend we remember fixing the sound system was not at the wedding and does not even know the person who was having the wedding. But we both distinctly remember our friend not only being there, but actually saving the day. We sometimes catch ourselves talking about it, and once praised our friend for saving that when and he was like, what? Who's such and such? I wasn't even there. And the final one for tonight. I was playing Minecraft with friends over Skype on my desktop PC when I disconnected from Minecraft. I was still chatting with everybody on Skype when I checked my browser. That also wasn't in function. So I got up and decided to check the router, announcing to everyone what I was doing. I checked it and it was fine. So still unable to connect, I asked the group, what should I do? And somebody replied, check that it's plugged in. I stood up by saying, well, how am I still talking to you then? Assuming it was a bug or partial disconnect. I at this point saw my Ethernet cable unplugged and about 2 centimeters away from the back of my machine. I announced this over Skype to everyone, and as soon as I did it, the call dropped. This freaked me out for years until I saw a demo of someone scanning a VGA cable from across the room and managed to get the approximation of the picture. I believe that VoIP part of the connection was able to make the jump across a centimetre or so gap, but I didn't move anything at the point, and my part of the time witnesses as well. So basically what they're saying is it wasn't plugged in, but it was still connected. And they're saying that there is a possible chance of it being connected with it not being plugged in, is what they're actually saying. So I suppose it does happen, because if you take two electric wires and keep them separate and through an electric current through them, you can see the sparks jumping from one to another, etc. So there we go. That's the end of tonight. Please keep an eye out on Facebook for the video from Saturday. I will be back tomorrow night for more paranormal experience, but this time from 8 o'clock. Coming up after me tonight is a brand new show. You may have listened to down the road a piece on a Thursday evening. But tonight we're going to have a bit of classical down the road a piece. So it's going to be more of your older music, bit heavier type of music, etc. Have a listen to it. Hope you enjoy it. If so, it'll become a weekly thing. But please stay tuned and listen to that. And I will see you all tomorrow at 8 p.m. So until then, it's good night from me, and I'll see you all tomorrow.